Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Frank and I'm a landscape photographer, and in this video I'm going to be giving more of an in-depth review about the Canon EOS R. I'm going to be explaining a little bit about the specs, what I think about the camera, and my overall opinion, and hopefully towards the end of this video you might have a clear understanding and whether the camera's right for you. I previously did a video on my channel very briefly explaining the Canon EOS R, kind of like my first impressions about it, and that was uploaded to my channel when I had just bought the camera. So the video that you're watching now is kind of going to be a little bit more of an in-depth, a bit more of the key features that I find most important about the camera. Also, there is one thing to note, guys. I am recording on the Canon EOS R right now, but what I'll do is I'll leave some like pre-recorded footage, and I'll basically attach that alongside my explanations of what I feel about the Canon EOS R throughout the video. So let's begin with something that I found to be quite surprising, and the first point that I'd like to talk about, and that's the shutter speed. Now, the shutter speed on the Canon EOS R is 1/8000th of a second, and for comparison, the 7D, which is the camera I have right here, is roughly the same, 1/8000th of a second. Now you're probably thinking, where on earth is this comparison? They both have the same or similar shutter speeds, you know, what the hell am I comparing shutter speeds for? But the truth is that I believe that the comparison lies with the usage of the camera. Now, in a nutshell, the shutter speed determines kind of how much light reaches the sensor. You, being the photographer, ultimately determine how long or how short the shutter is actually open or closed for. Now, it's important to note that some DSLR cameras, generally the older models, had two types of shutter mechanisms, I guess you could say, inside the camera itself. The first of which is the most common, and it's the mechanism that's used in most modern DSLR and mirrorless cameras today, and that's, that's known as focal plane shutter, and the second is leaf shutter. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to dive into the 100% pros and cons between leaf shutters and focal plane shutters, but generally speaking, the main reason why most camera manufacturers such as Sony, Nikon and Canon stick to focal plane shutters is because they're actually much easier to manufacture, they're much easier to produce. And also, if your shutter kind of cracks up, then it's also kind of much easier to fix. Whereas if you have a leaf shutter integrated inside of your camera body, then that's an extra shutter chamber. If it fails, an extra cost to basically fix. If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not also 100% sure on this, please do leave a comment in the comment section down below if you know, but I think that Hasselblad and Leica in some of their cameras use the two types of shutters, the leaf shutter and the focal plane. Obviously, because both have pros and cons, but please do leave a comment down below if that is correct, if I am correct in that case. With the exception of Canon and Nikon's most high-end DSLR cameras like the 1DX series, most mirrorless cameras can compete in terms of shutter speed. Another thing about this camera that I found to be incredible and just super handy in so many different situations is the autofocusing, edge-to-edge autofocusing system. With the edge-to-edge autofocusing system, I could pretty much set my focus points wherever I wanted it to be on the screen, and that was great, especially when I had to photograph landscapes in really, really awkward angles. I could set my focus to wherever it is I wanted to be, and it just made it much simpler to highlight the objects that I wanted to highlight on the field. Portability. Now, portability is something that I think this camera actually excels in. Making the swap to a mirrorless camera to something that was actually smaller than a DSLR, because ultimately I think a lot of photographers, and myself included, like actually carrying a big camera. It feels, I don't know, it feels like we're carrying something that's worth the money that we've paid for. But this camera surprised me. I've had it in my hand, I felt the weight, it fits really nicely, it's super comfortable, and the fact that it's slightly smaller than a DSLR really isn't a big issue for me anymore. Plus, it really made me pay attention to the details of the camera, what I should be valuing over other aspects. For example, the screen size of my old Canon 7D was 7.5 centimeters, whereas my Canon EOS R was 8 centimeters. And it may not seem like that much, but when you actually have the camera in front of you and you compare screen sizes, you can really notice it. And I think something as overlooked as a screen size is actually important when it comes to the overall way that you perceive the image that you've just shot. I can't tell you how many times I've used my 7D and I've checked the screen size here when I'm taking pictures, and I can't tell you how many times I've deleted in camera, which again is something that I suggest you don't do, is delete in camera. But yeah, it's just happens so often because I look at the picture on the screen and I don't feel it's worth anything because the screen isn't that bright, or it just doesn't display the image. It just doesn't display the image the way that I've seen it on the viewfinder. So having a big screen makes a difference. So those are just a few of the most important things that I felt I wanted to talk about in relation to the Canon EOS R, and the things that I obviously felt were the most important elements of the camera. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will leave a link in the description of this video to a pretty good article that I found online that describes the differences between the two types of sensors that I mentioned previously in the video. So do check that article out if you fancy a read, and if you wanted to learn a little bit more about the differences, the pros and cons about each sensor. As always, social links will be left in the description down below, and do leave a comment as to what you find most interesting about DSLR and or mirrorless cameras. Thank you so much for checking out this video and for sticking around until the end. Peace, guys.